Should the Rams trade for this backup quarterback? The Rams move off this recently signed cornerback, and we're looking at stat projections for the 2024 Rams. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramley, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your Los Angeles Rams, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, do us a huge favor and hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, hit that like button. My name is Doug McCain. Friends call me D-Mac. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMac_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade, 24/7 sports, Bleacher Reports, SI, Dodgers Nation, the Rams 4 Locked On. And as always, I'm joined by the Rams pre-half and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio station, ESPN 710 LA. He's entered his 9th season covering your Los Angeles Rams, the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers. You can follow him on X at Travis Rogers. And on today's show, we have the projected stats for your 2024 Rams. Are they a little low? I think they might be. Also, the Rams move off a quarterback, and should they trade for this quarterback or look for a quarterback that possibly gets cut? So quarterbacks, lots to talk about here on Locked On Rams. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app and create an account and use code Locked On. So, Travis, we are Puka Nacua, Case Keenum. We are Robert Woods days away from opening kickoff. It's getting very, very close right here. And I think the first thing that we look at for this team is the offense. And are they going to be able to outscore teams? Are they going to run the football? Or ESPN, they released their projected stats today. Mike Clay, his projected stats for your 2024 Rams. And I think they're a little low. And the first one we'll start with is, of course, the quarterback, Matthew Stafford. They have Matthew Stafford played in 15 games, throwing for 4,057 yards, throwing 23 tutties and 12 interceptions. So do you think that's a little on the low side?
Well, let's start with the first number that you gave out, 15 games. What the heck happened in the other two? That's the part that I want to know. I'll be honest, whether he gets to 30 touchdowns or 40 touchdowns, however many picks he throws, we'll talk about that in a second. That's important, obviously. But the number that should probably jump to the front of the list is games played, games started, right? Games finished, I think, is probably the most important one, because if Matthew Stafford plays 17 games, I have a hard time envisioning a scenario where they're not winning more than they're losing. Now, maybe it's not by a mile. Maybe it's a 9-8 situation, a 10-7 situation. But if Matthew Stafford plays every game, I just think he and the offense is way too good to not have a winning record. You play 15 of those games. The other two games, what happened there? Is Jimmy G there? Is it somebody else? Is Jimmy G look like the good version of Jimmy G that we've seen previously? Does he look like the version of Jimmy G that's had him bouncing around at the end of his career and riding the bench in various places? I don't know. The 15 to me, D-Mac, is the number that kind of jumps out. The 2-to-1 interception, touchdown to interception ratio. I would like to see it a little higher than that. I think he's probably going to have to throw somewhere closer to 30 touchdowns than somewhere in the 20s. But Matthew Stafford's always going to throw a few interceptions. He tries to, he's aggressive. He pushes the ball down the field. There's going to be picks. So that's just life with Matthew Stafford. That's not a big deal. But that 15 number, boy, that's a scary projection.
Exactly. And it's also when do those two games come, right? Is it those two games at the start of the season where you don't have Jimmy Garoppolo? Is it the middle of the season? Who are those games going to be against? So absolutely, that is one of the big takeaways when you look at the stat line. And really, I think, look, let's be honest. I mean, these guys have a lot of teams to review, a lot of projections to make. And you look at Stafford's numbers last year, he goes 15 games again, throws for 3,965 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. So feels like you just kind of looked at last year's number. You took one touchdown away, added an interception, and basically threw some more yards than that. And that's kind of how you projected it. But I agree with you.
Yeah. I think if the numbers are similar to what they were a year ago, that's not good. The Rams should be a better offensive team this year than they were a year ago. I understand that stuff comes up, but let's assume that you get a relatively complete season out of Kyren Williams, where he plays maybe 14 or 15 games as opposed to what he did last year. Let's assume that Blake Corum is a reasonable fill-in for him in the event that he does miss some time. We already know that the offensive line should probably be better this year than it was a year ago. There's going to be a little bit more of an emphasis on the tight end group. Maybe Kupp is a little bit healthier than he was a year ago. So to just think that those are going to be about the same, I think they should probably go up a little. I don't know if they'll jump up by 20 or 25% or anything like that. Probably not. But I would expect them to go up just because the offense as a whole is better suited to be more consistent.
Yeah, it's a more complete offense. And I think when you look at Matthew Stafford this season, it's not judging him by how many touchdowns and how many yards. It's, to me, touchdowns versus interceptions, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you get 30 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, something in that ratio, I think you're looking at a successful season. But I think if he puts up these numbers, I think you're looking at a 9-8 year, right? I don't think you're looking at a tremendously successful season, but it is going to be more run heavy. So that is going to impact his stats. Now, another projection that I found interesting was you got Kyren Williams, 14 games, 1,078 yards, 10 touchdowns, 285 receiving yards. Kyren Williams has really emerged as one of the top 10 running backs in the National Football League. And I think the big thing for him is how much production you get from Blake Corum. I mean, is it a true two-headed monster? Do you go to Blake Corum when you're in the red zone? I think that's definitely one of the big storylines to look at early in the season.
Yeah, I know. Not to repeat myself, but I'm going to. It's how many games is he going to play? Right. Yeah. If that projection is right, I like that. That is a healthy amount of games. That's the most games we will have seen out of Kyren Williams at any point in his NFL career. And I think that the Corum part of it really makes that a manageable number, that if Corum can come in and be the back that we saw at Michigan or something close to that and have an impact on games the way he did at the college level, then they're in a really good spot. I almost take those two guys' numbers collectively and add them together and see what those look like, because if they have, we've seen it, right? We've seen it before. When they get production out of the running back position and it's not a full-fledged Matthew Stafford show, you can win with the Matthew Stafford show, but it puts a lot of pressure on him. Your margins get very small. If there's a running game to speak of, they're going to be in pretty good shape. And we know Williams is good. Like, there's no question about whether or not he's a good player. There's question about whether or not he can play often enough. And Corum, I think, at least gives you a little bit of peace of mind that even if he goes down, you still are going to get production out of that position.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's about the injuries for Kyren Williams. He has been banged up last year, missed 4 games, and I think that really is what it comes down to. Is, yes, by these numbers, it would technically be a worse season for Kyren Williams, but how does that look combined with Blake Corum? Doesn't necessarily mean that it's worse for the Rams. And I do think that if he stays healthy, he's going to put up better numbers than this. And you have Blake Corum projected at 14 games, 512 rushing yards, 4 TDs, 130 receiving yards. I think there's a chance you could see more from Blake Corum. So we'll see. Can they be that 1-2 punch that we hope they could be? And then the receivers, Puka Nacua, 15 games, 88 catches, 1,238 yards, and 6 touchdowns. So this clearly indicates that the projections don't have him being a flash-in-the-pan, one-year wonder type of player.
Yeah, I don't think he is. The question isn't to me whether or not we're telling them, hey, remember, what was that guy's name that showed up for 1 year and was awesome and then we never heard from him again? I don't think that's really in play for him. I think he's too good of a player for that. The question is, how much closer does he get to doing what he did in his rookie season at various points in the rest of his career? Again, everydayers are probably like, yep, we know, Trav, we know what you're about to say. You might. This is a Matthew Stafford thing. If Matthew Stafford is your quarterback, you're going to put up numbers. It is literally as simple as that. That if he is your quarterback, he will find you. If you get open, he will find you. If you do what you're supposed to do, if you are where you're supposed to be, he will find you. Nacua seems to be a guy that understands that. He thrived on it in his rookie year. So I expect him to have a very similar year to what he did last year. Maybe come down a little bit, but that doesn't mean it's still not an unbelievable season.
No doubt about it. I mean, Matthew Stafford, he is going to throw the football to his top reads, his top targets. And I think that last year, him and Puka Nacua, they established something. With Cooper Kupp missing time, he stepped into that role. He became that guy, and I think that continues this season. Now, one of the big X factors for the Rams next season is what will they get out of Cooper Kupp? Will he get back to being a Pro Bowl level wide receiver? We'll talk about his projections. That's coming up next.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Gametime, right? I have both of my sons actually were just hooked up with Gametime, and they're like, dude, why didn't you tell me about this sooner? This is amazing. They got the discount that we've talked about. You got to put the Gametime app on your phone because it is a great way to buy tickets for just about everything in your neighborhood. You want to go to a ball game, you want to go to a concert, you want to see comedy, you want to go to the theater, whatever it is you like, Gametime has you covered. And for baseball tickets in particular, the price goes down the closer you get to the beginning. I love the little toggle on all pricing, all in, so you don't get hit with that. Wait, what? Where did that number come from at the end? You know exactly what it is. So take the guesswork out of buying all of your tickets, concert tickets, baseball tickets, upcoming football season tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create the account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.
And we are off and running here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, a special shout out to those everyday listeners out there watching and listening to every single episode. So definitely join that 5 episodes per week club, whether you watch it on YouTube, listen on the podcast, you want to stay locked into your Los Angeles Rams. So definitely be sure to catch every single episode. And here, Travis, in our second segment, we're going to just continue on the conversation on the projected stats, because this is one of the most important players as far as how his projections and what his totals will be and how that'll impact the overall team, and that is Cooper Kupp. And they have Cooper Kupp playing 15 games, making 78 catches for 997 yards and 7 touchdowns. And that's pretty decent, not too bad, but I definitely am a little more bullish on Cooper Kupp this season. And not saying it's go back to 2021 God mode Cooper Kupp, Super Kupp, or anything like that, but I think one thing that really sticks out to me when you look at his numbers and what we saw last season is with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp on the field at the same time. They played 12 games together, and Cooper Kupp had a higher first read target percentage than Puka Nacua. Is that 29.7% to 28.7%. So that tells me that when Cooper Kupp is on the field, even with Puka Nacua, Matthew Stafford is going to go to Cooper Kupp first, potentially. And as long as he stays healthy, I think he's a man on a mission this season to prove that he's still got it.
Health is everything. The numbers that you read at the beginning, I think I'd take those, right? If you could tell me you can grab those and put those in the bank and that's what you're going to get, I'd take them. Because I think that those numbers speak to durability. They speak to him being out there way more. He can't get to those numbers if he's not playing a lot of football. I do think that target rate that you're talking about, that first look rate that you mentioned, that yes, Kupp's is a little higher, but not by much, about 1.5%, give or take. So that's a pretty close call right there. I think that maybe you might see that flip-flop just a little bit. Instead of being a point behind, he might be a point ahead. But I think that basically what you're talking about is you got 2 guys that you can really rely on, 2 guys that you can go to. I agree with you, D-Mac. I think that Cooper Kupp is one of the sneaky guys. Sneaky is the wrong word because he's a famous NFL player. Everybody knows who he is, but he's one of those guys that has to get maybe not back to that Triple Crown season that we saw, like you mentioned, in 2021, but one of those guys that every week you're talking about, had a pretty good day. Cooper Kupp. We can't be talking about, hey, when is he coming back? Hey, why hasn't he had that impactful game? If we go beyond a week or two of things like that, I think that it's a very different season for the Rams. It puts a lot of pressure on Puka. It puts a lot of pressure on Matthew Stafford. That if those numbers that you talked about with Cooper Kupp, that just, right around 1,000 yards, maybe even a little less, about, a couple of handfuls of touchdowns, he plays virtually every game. That's a very, very successful season for Cooper Kupp.
I agree. I will say I'm a little greedier, and I think that I would rather take better numbers, bigger numbers. It's almost like you take 3 games in the 4-game series. No, I'm getting greedy. I want the sweep, right? And I think with Cooper Kupp, it's the same thing. And I think that there's a world where we're 7 games into the season, we're saying, oh, you know what? The offense still runs through Cooper Kupp. And we're going to see those tweets out there. Cooper Kupp is so back, and good vibes about him and what he's producing. But more numbers here. Demarcus Robinson, 15 games, 58 catches, 698 yards, 4 touchdowns. Tutu Atwell, 20 catches, 265 yards, and 1 touchdown. So not very high on Tutu. And then they got Jordan Whittington, 11 catches, 131 yards, and 1 touchdown. So big takeaway there is it's going to be a top-heavy receiving core led by Puka and Cooper Kupp, getting the lion's share of the numbers in production.
Yeah, those guys are going to get just about everything that you're thinking about. Like you said, if you're Matthew Stafford and you're at the line of scrimmage and you're looking around and you got Kupp on one side, you got Nacua on the other, those are your first 2 reads. Maybe in one order, one play, the other order, the other play. But those other guys will not eat first very often. Demarcus Robinson will again, he's a pro. Matthew Stafford will find him when it's time to find him. But this is not going to be everybody spreads it around. There's a whole bunch to go around. Everybody gets a little. This is going to be 2 guys get a lot. And I'm okay with that because those 2 guys that are going to get a lot are really high-level, impactful players. And again, I'll come back to it. I'll repeat it for the 3rd or 4th or 10th time or whatever it is. Games played is the number for them. That's the number. If they play, they're in really good spots. They're too good of players to be out there and not impact the game. If they're out there, Rams fans are going to be very pleased.
No doubt about it. Let the big boys eat. That's what I say. I mean, absolutely feed those guys. And real quick before we go to our next segment, the Rams did part ways with a cornerback they brought in after the injuries, Darius Williams and Trey White. They were banged up, and they bring in Jerry Jacobs, and Jerry Jacobs is already gone. I mean, they made a deal with him, and they waived him on Tuesday with an injury settlement. And to me, my big takeaway from this is, 1, Darius Williams, he's making his way back from the hamstring injury. Trey White, we know how much they have invested in him as far as the 1-year deal, or the get-right deal, the prove-it contract to get him back when he's healthy. He's definitely one of the better corners in the league. But also, this is good news for is Jalen McCullough and Josh Wallace. And they have a better shot at making this roster now. And I think that, yes, they're a little thin at the cornerback spot, but you also have some safeties that can play that position as well. You got the versatility of guys like Quentin Lake. So I definitely don't make too much out of this.
No, I don't either. I don't think this is something that, we would be talking about if it were anything other than that weird time before the beginning of the season. This is really not a huge deal. The name that you brought up is the one that I think is really interesting, and that's Tre'Davious White. That if he's good, or even pretty good, they've got themselves a difference maker on that side of the ball. One of the things that we talked about so much last year is their inability to take the ball away. That's what this guy does. This guy goes and gets the football. He makes big plays. He intercepts opposing quarterbacks. If he's healthy, and if, like you said, and I think it's exactly right, I want a show me deal. He needs to ball out. He needs to go out there and make an impact, whether it's to stay in LA with the Rams and make a run over the next few years, or go find a bigger bag somewhere else. That's good. That's nothing but good news for the Rams. If he's healthy, and all indications are that he's going to be pretty good and ready to go by the start of the season, then the cornerback depth, I think, becomes a slightly less of an issue. I agree with you. It's a little thin, but if that dude can play at the level that I think we're all hoping for, we may be, we, like you mentioned, beginning of the season, hey, Cooper Kupp's still the number 1 guy 7 weeks in. We could be talking 7 weeks in, but Tre'Davious White's already got 4 interceptions, and he took 1 back to the house. That could be a huge story for the Rams.
I'm so with you on that one. And we could talk about depth all day and what it means, but this team is only going to go as far as their high upside players, their stars that have taken a step back, but have an opportunity to get back to being close to that guy they were in the past. And Trey White is certainly one of those guys. I also add to this is, look, you got the final scrimmage against the Texans today, and you got the final preseason game this weekend. After that, hey, it's going to be some madness, right? You got the final cut starting, and we'll see what the Rams do and how that fares as well, because I guarantee they're going to be opportunistic. They always are, so I would not be surprised to see them make a trade, them add someone, because they know that that's a position of need potentially. But coming up next, speaking of positions of need, do the Rams need to go out there and trade for a backup quarterback? There's one in Cleveland that is currently rumored to be on the block. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
All right, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, right? We've talked about it for months, years here on Locked On Rams. It's America's number one sportsbook. So you know how much fun you can have with FanDuel, about looking at some projections on your team, about finding some individual players on your team, about betting divisions, about betting conferences, all of these things. FanDuel, you know we do that. But we got something a little bit different for you. Right now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and you get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Let me tell you that again, right? You bet $5 now through September 22nd, and you get a 3-week freebie of the NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season afternoon out of market game, which is awesome, right? Instead of flipping back and forth, you just got everything right there in one spot. You will love it. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Again, that's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to download America's number one sportsbook, a $5 bet, and you get a 3-week free trial of the NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. You can't beat that.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Travis, so here in our third segment, we're going to talk some backup quarterback. And as of right now, Sean McVay has not fully committed to Stetson Bennett being the Rams' backup quarterback heading into those first 2 preseason games where Jimmy Garoppolo will not be participating because he's serving a 2-game suspension. Now, I think that if I had to bet on them just keeping Stetson Bennett and rolling with it and just hoping that Matthew Stafford stays healthy, I definitely lean towards that. But there are going to be some options available. And one that has presented itself around the league is Cleveland's Dorian Thompson-Robinson. The Athletic has reported that there's multiple teams that are interested in possibly trading for the quarterback out of UCLA. And yeah, well, I just saw right now. I will say this. Look, when it comes to DTR, I did push for the Rams to draft him a couple years ago before they drafted Stetson Bennett. He definitely had some moments with the Browns, led them to win. But, I mean, if you look at, he had a negative 0.222 EPA. That was 45 out of 48 qualifying quarterbacks, but he did lead the Browns to that win over the Pittsburgh Steelers. Having said that, here's the DTR experience. And this is literally, I could be probably one of the world's leaders in how many snaps you've watched. I literally watch every single game, every snap at UCLA. And I just want to tell you, I used to have hair like Brad Pitt and Troy before watching DTR at UCLA. No, not even joking, right? Like he'd make these wow plays. He'd leap over guys and the arm strength was there. And then you would see him just unnecessarily drop the ball like it was a bar of soap, bad interceptions, bad fumbles. The mistakes were there. So he definitely has that ability to kind of make some wow plays. But we kind of talked about on the show, as a backup quarterback, you kind of want a guy to be a little bit of a game manager, just make sure you don't make mistakes. Not sure DTR is that guy. I think there could be some better options than him.
There's 2 things going on there. Number one, I think, is what you just mentioned, that when you're in a backup quarterback situation, I don't need you to come in and win the game. I don't need you to come in and make me do things that go, oh my gosh, I've never seen something like that before. What I need you to do is to prevent me from yelling at the TV, what the heck is going on out there? That's the goal. Don't make people yell at their TV like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. That needs to not come out of your mouth. I didn't watch as many plays as you do. I never had hair like Brad Pitt and Troy, as you can probably tell.
We were on the Pac-12 network, so you know, hard to find UCLA games with DTR.
But I know that when I did see him, there was a lot of, does that guy have any idea what they're trying to do out there? Like in the NFL, accuracy and decision-making are number 1 and number 2. I don't know if he has either one of those things in boatloads. Number 2 is, I do think that there might be some better options, and especially if we're running a Sean McVay offense. And this offense has been developed to service Matthew Stafford, and I think that Jimmy G could probably manage a good portion of it. They're similar in a handful of ways. I don't know if a quarterback like Dorian Thompson-Robinson has the same skill set and comes in. He's much more of a playmaker as opposed to a pocket guy. I just don't think it's a good fit on any level.
Yeah, me too. I think I like Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Thanks for the memories, but I just don't like him for the Rams necessarily. And the Browns are certainly definitely going to look to deal him. Of course, they brought in Jameis Winston to be their backup quarterback, but they're looking to trade for a offensive lineman. And you kind of look at the options there. The Rams, are they really going to trade some depth away? I mean, you got Andy Dickerson, who was with the Rams from 2012 to 2020. He's their assistant offensive line coach, and there's a connection there with a Joe Noteboom, but the Rams, they like Joe Noteboom, the depth he provides. They see him almost as not necessarily a starter, but someone that is a part of this foundation that can come in, they can plug in multiple positions. So you're not going to have Joe Noteboom for him. And also, I think we talked about in the last segment, there's going to be some options at quarterback. I mean, you got Stidham could be available. Wilson could be available. If you really want to go that route, you can probably get some quality elsewhere. But let's see how Stetson performs. He did at least make some improvements. He limited the mistakes a little more. Definitely not an outstanding performance by any stretch, but let's see how he finishes off the preseason and just hope that Matthew Stafford stays healthy. Because let's just be honest. I mean, no Matthew Stafford, no winning season. And you really, especially look at the competition early on, you go into Detroit. I mean, how many backup quarterbacks are you going to plug into that game against Detroit and hope they're going to go in there and win? It'd be unlikely and a tough task anyway.
Yeah, no, look, I think it's going to be Bennett. And I know that we have some precedent as far as the Rams bringing in quarterbacks last minute and getting them ready to play. Baker Mayfield, the ultimate example of that, where they got him at least ready enough in a day to win a game on a Thursday night, which the further we get away from that, the more unbelievable that actually was. But I think if they were going to do something, they might have done it by now, just to get a little bit of a runway for all the reasons that we've talked about, that the first 2 weeks and Jimmy G being unavailable. I think it's going to be Stetson Bennett. I think you cross your fingers, toes, and everything else you got that Matthew Stafford stays healthy. That's your chance to beat them. That's the Lions being them. That's your chance to beat Arizona in week 2 on the road. And then Jimmy G's back after that. I think Stetson Bennett makes the team. I don't love it. I hope I never have to see him play in anything other than a kneel down role. But I think that's what we're going to get for the first couple of weeks.
I totally agree. I think that's what it is. You know, I love speculation, like talking about trades, but I also kind of have a rule that, hey, if it's not likely, then I don't spend too much time kind of diving into it. I think right now, that's the decision. That's the move. You got to hope that Stetson Bennett has a clean last showing here and doesn't do anything terrible that really would risk making this team.
Or counterpoint, he's really terrible and leaves them no choice. Right.
Yeah, that's the thing.
If it's good, fine. Then you just kind of keep it moving and everything we talked about, you cross your fingers. But if he's bad, then you got to try something. Then you're kind of forced into we at least know that this is bad. Maybe something else is just as bad, but the unknown might be the better option at that point.
Yeah, exactly. That's where he's at. And that's why I think it's just limiting mistakes, making the right reads, not trying to do too much, and he'll be behind Matthew Stafford to start the season. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. And you can follow the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers, at Travis Rogers. And until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.